Here's another story about a Grigio Fumo Ferrari that I started to record back in 2011. All right, so I'm sitting here with David Eichenbaum.
Hello, David Eichenbaum here with Tom Young.
And, there's a story that I wanted to tell. It's about David's PF Coupe.
So I was looking for a car to rally with my dad that would be eligible for various rallies. I hadn't, ever done anything at the rallying level, and I was looking at the Colorado Grand, the Cal Melee, and these mountain melees, and all these rallies, all these things that have blossomed up, it seems, these soft adventures, or so to speak, over the past 5 years or so. And I wanted to do some with my dad, because my dad always did car things with me, and I was directed to Tom.
When David told me about this, I said, I gotta help David, because this is a really cool thing.
If
I could have done this with my old man, I was thinking to myself, my dad was into cars, and it's and I said I can afford to do this, and we're gonna go, and it's gonna be the boys are gonna go out,
right,
and, tear up the roads with this car. Well, then that's a great story, and if I can facilitate that, that's a neat thing to do. It was kind of like on top of just helping find a car and doing all this other stuff. It was fun to be involved in this. It felt like a good thing to do.
And that's what was nice about the whole process. My mission, it was very important to me, and Tom picked up on that and carried that. And the car has a lot of soul. The car has its own life and personality, and you put those together, and it's a very organic, intangible sort of energy that the whole process with this particular car had. And so I was focusing on a PF Coupe because I like Ferraris. My dad liked Ferraris and liked cars in general. It's a big car. He was about 6'6" when he stood up, and he was a tall guy. I didn't want to be cramped up in some car, and I figured it'd be eligible for a number of rallies. It was a two-seat car, a V12, and a lot of nice features about it. And so I called Tom to look for a car. I thought he might have a line on one. I looked at a couple. I actually looked at 4 PF Coupes, including the one that Tom found. So that's a lot of PF Coupes to look at, considering how many are left on the planet.
And what had happened was the call started because David, actually broke your leg. That was when you broke your leg, and you couldn't make it out to Monterey.
Yeah.
You had a car that you were thinking about buying. It was a car that I had actually worked on.
Yeah.
It was being marketed. We were asked to just get it ready for auction.
It was a red one, right?
Yeah. And it was going to go to auction. It was being auctioned, and he wanted my opinion about it since I had basically been the last person to work on the car. I thought it was a pretty good car.
Yeah.
But I think either I got the email late or somehow, but I had basically only gotten back in touch with David the day after the auction. So we missed the car. But at that point, I realized that you were pretty serious. You were ready to pull the trigger last night on that car, and I said, well, let me think a little bit, and let me think if I could come up with somebody else. And always whenever I get that phone call or that conversation, I'm racking my brain. Okay, PF Coupe. Who do I know that's got a PF Coupe?
Right.
And I remembered, this PF Coupe because I had this conversation with this gentleman, Ed Long.
Ed was a very private individual. He's the previous owner of this PF Coupe, and he just likes to kind of make friends and talk about the car. And he had it for 38 years. Mm-hmm. 38 years.
And that's the conversation that Ed and I had, which was just talking.
I think that's the dialogue that you started with him, just talking about the heart and soul of the car, which is the long-term ownership.
Yeah. And so I remembered that car, and I said, well, he wasn't really trying to sell back then a year ago, but, I should give him a call. And I don't think Ed was really following up prices. And, David had done enough research to know how much PF Coupes are kind of trading for. He had an idea of how much he had to kind of spend to get the car that he wanted. And I said, well, this is how it starts. Just give that a call. So emailed him, called him, and said, look, I might have somebody who wants to buy a car. I know you're not thinking about it, but, he's in this range. Mm-hmm. I said, this is probably somewhere where he would probably buy at. And Ed, I think, just because he hasn't been following the prices, was like, well, that would probably make me think about selling the car. And at the same time, because I'm not a broker and I'm not very comfortable with this type of dealing, because it's like I understand as an owner, it's your baby, and I almost feel like you're taking the baby away from someone to say I'm taking this away.
Especially when it's someone who's had it that long.
Oh yeah. So I said to David, I called David up and I said, okay, well, here's the deal. Here's a car. Be respectful to the guy. He's owned it for a long time. If I'm going to bring you in on this deal,
You want it to be gentlemanly.
Yeah, and don't
right.
don't dicker with him. We agree to a price, and he's okay with it. Just be respectful to that because I don't want to beat the guy up.
Right.
And if that's the case, then he's not going to want to do it. And so David was really interested in.
I was into that. I was into that whole idea and that philosophy, and that's the way that I went ahead and approached it.
And you also, since you owned other Ferraris, it wasn't like you're new to Ferraris. You understand what it costs to fix it. We knew that there was deferred maintenance on the car.
Yeah, we knew it would need work.
Right.
Yeah, but we knew it had good bones. So many of these PF coupes have been partially restored, 80s restored, painted in funny ways, interiors done. They have no documentation. They've been through 7, 8 owners,
Right.
Who knows how many owners. And this one had a lot of its life story that came with it. It had its old Italian papers. It had its build sheet. It had documents from the first Italian owner. It had the documents of the servicemen who brought it across the pond.
And when Ed showed me pictures, now I never had seen the car. It was out in Oregon, and I hadn't seen the car personally, but the pictures were just original interior, original paint, original. A lot of the details from what I could see is like, wow, this is. Pictures are deceiving, but at the same time, you knew that from his description how many years he's had it. It's like this could be a really cool, neat car.
Really
original
neat.
weather stripping.
Yeah.
So then I was actually heading to Goodwood, and David said that he was going to go out there, and he was going to go out there with his dad. His mom.
So I went out to Salem while Tom was in Goodwood or around that period. And we met Ed and Lynn Long, prior owners of the car. They made us sandwiches. We hung out with them. Drove the car briefly with Ed. And he liked how I drove the car, despite the fact that my leg had been recently broken in a separate car accident. And we made the deal. We bought the car. I had a nice trip. I went to a few wineries with my mom and dad, and the countryside was just beautiful, and Ed and Lynn, I think, were comfortable that their car was going to Tom and me.
I guess to fill in, I'm in Goodwood, try to check my email, because I'm kind of want to know, did the meeting go well? And it was just real short email replies, which was like, meeting went well, we're buying the car. And I could remember being, on the other side of the world, and just the smile for you, okay, that's good, and on top of it, it was nice to feel like David trusted me to say, and we're sending it directly to you and Francois, and, it would be great because, you've been part of this and I want you to continue to be part of it. So I was excited. It was like, this is what I want to do. This is part of the whole thing that I really enjoy doing, is it's not just fixing the cars, but there's this whole process in which you can help people, and it sounds hokey, like dreams coming true, but this is the meat of the stuff, and I really was just loving it, and so the car comes over to Francois.
Needed work.
It did, but man, I looked at this car and I was like, this is really neat. The original paint, the interior was like original. It was like all this stuff. There were a couple little things that were changed on the car.
It was an untouched car. It hadn't been messed with.
The weather seals on this car were like soft and pliable. I was amazed. And so we started the process of fixing it. There were things that, we knew that were problematic. The engine, he had changed the head gaskets on the engine because of a leak, and the oil, or there were oil seals that he had changed and didn't install them correctly, so they were leaking. So you really couldn't run the car that well without a lot of oil dripping out. Francois, of course, being, a mechanic for 40, 50 years, had all the tricks to do to help me and show me, and we fixed all those leaks.
Ed doing his own maintenance. He didn't have the facility or the shop to do. I think he had a lot of mechanical knowledge. He had raced Datsun 510s and so on and so forth, but he didn't have the manpower.
And it just, it just needed to be done. And David was very understanding about the fact that, okay, we got to take the whole rear suspension apart. Then we might as well do the bushing seals. The bushings on the springs. But it was just
sent all the brakes out.
And we did all the brakes and just said, look, from our experience, the best thing, especially since we know that Ed hadn't done a thorough brake job, but the best thing, because if you start from scratch, you then basically start from day one and not worry about something else failing a little bit further down the road. And we also knew that David was planning on taking this car on a rally.
Yeah, we were going on a long-distance rally. So I had registered the car. My dad and I decided we want to do this rally in October of 2009.
Right, and we were getting close enough that we said, okay,
it's kind of getting.
I think we can do it. And it was probably about a year, because it was just
about a year.
You got to get.
It just takes time. Yeah,
you got to send.
We had to send stuff out. Come back, put them in.
So we said, okay, I could make that date. That's pretty reasonable. But then what happened was when we started to get into like August August or so.
I had never driven the car, except with Ed for a half mile, and it wasn't running.
Couple things. Yeah. One is I always feel like it's good to put a shakedown cruise just simply for David to get comfortable with the car, but also just for us to kind of work it through if there are any bugs or kinks that David wanted to fix or anything. So I said, well, look, let's come up to New York. We'll get the car, and I'll put a little route that we'll drive, and we ended up driving over to Paul Russell's shop, and just drove from Connecticut, and David came up for a couple of days, and our friend Yale Evelyn with his 4-headlight car came out with us,
and that was a great run. Tom and I were together in the car a lot. We clocked the car on GPS. We drove it in night. We drove it in day. We drove it in traffic.
And
car vapor locked on me.
But that's the thing. That was when it really paid off, because like David and I, it's like he got to know where the light switches were. He knew how to cold start. And New England in September, morning was frost on the windows, and then in the afternoons it would go to 80 degrees and stop and go traffic, and then we also had backcountry roads. So we really kind of experienced all the type of weather and experiences for David to understand how to start the car cold, how to start the car hot. And I've also heard stories of guys getting cars where they go to these rallies. The restorer delivers it the day of. They've never driven the car, but they don't know how to slip the clutch. So the time that we spent, David and I kind of went through, like, how should I engage the overdrive?
Right.
How should I, what's this noise?
How do we get the gauges to light up in the middle of the night?
Is this normal?
What is it? Can we get down to the fuel refill light without running out of gas?
So I thought it was invaluable, and I was hoping that David felt the same way.
I did. There were a lot of those question marks that weren't question marks when it was just me and my dad, who really aren't wrenches at all.
And then what happens is, we're stuck in traffic and the car stalled, and I was with Yale at that time, and all of a sudden I get a call from David. I'm stalled, I don't know what to do. And we spun around, came back, and I said, it's probably vapor lock. Turned on the fuel pump,
and it was
immediately gone. And he says, well, just that there by itself, he said, was worth it, because if that happened to me somewhere else, I would not have known. And now it's experience.
We met great people up there that you knew, Tom.
Yeah,
Gary Hineker.
And
we met
Sam met us with his,
Sam Hallowell,
right? He's the Northeast president. And
it was just cool. All these car guys, we got together.
But these are all people that I kind of know through the site and friends and customers or whatever. So it's just fun. It's like, hey, we're on the way. Oh, I'll meet you there at this crab shack. So it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. The car worked well. And then we went ahead and we got it. A car held together. I don't think we had to do anything.
And sent it on its way. And I had, as always, as the mechanic and restorer, you got your fingers crossed. Like, okay, right. I hope the car turns out okay. And we send it off, and David gets the car.
So the next time I see the car, I rent a car. I go up, 4 or 6 weeks later, whatever, with my dad to the rally. We rent this little car. We drive from Charlotte to where the rally starts, which is in the hills of Virginia. I don't remember the little resort, but it's this little mountainous place. And the car's there. It's hanging out, waiting for us. And we do the rally, and it runs flawlessly. It was a neat experience for a lot of reasons. It was me and my dad doing this thing that I figured we'd be doing a lot of, with this car that was bought, prepped, tuned, and made for this type of travel. There was a California Spider on the rally, which was fun to sort of joust with. There were the Alfa TZ1. There were all these neat cars, Lamborghini Miura. And at the end of the rally, they have a dinner, and the rally organizer, they say something nice about everyone, and it was really nice. I don't think I've told you this, Tom. What they said, when they come to us, and for the doctors, Eichenbaum, my dad was very big about talking about. He was very proud of being an internist. He was an old-fashioned doctor, which is cool, Mm-hmm. And he said, if the doctor is Eichenbaum, you get this. Everyone gets a trophy. We got a trophy, a medium-sized trophy for almost zeroing out the rally. And he said, and I loved seeing you two in that Ferrari, wheels everywhere. Smoke coming out the dual quad pipes, being driven like God and Enzo intended.
That's great. That's great.
It was great.
Must have been a proud moment.
It was a proud moment.
It's like. It's the story that you guys set out to do.
Right.
You accomplished it, and you got the kudos from other enthusiasts.
The recognition that it was
that you wanted. Like it was almost like the perfect summation of the whole process.
That's right. And the bittersweet thing about it is my dad's had a cardiac history. He's had a hypertensive history, and he died 6 weeks after the rally unexpectedly. He was not a young man, nearly 73, but he wasn't really elderly either, and he was active.
And David was doing this. The shock in the news was that. David had called me after the rally because I, of course, wanted to know how it went, and he was just
I was pretty
beaming
excited
about it, and just like
excited.
great time, like just
Yeah.
can't wait to do more. He's submitting the car to other rallies and all this, and it was just great. So
I was going to take it to Cavallino shortly with my
right,
dad.
and there was
the
kind of
idea,
like we just okay, well that was end of October, and I hadn't heard from David, and I was heading down to Cavallino as well, and about a week before, I get a call from David, and he said, look, I know you're coming down, but I wanted to tell you this, before you came down, and I want to tell you, have you find out in another way. And when he told me about his dad, I just it was just a big hole in my heart, because following the story, and we had such great highs in the story, and it was just it plummeted to the bottom, and you're speechless, because it's just a surprise, and David knowing this, and the thing about it is like, because this relationship started probably a year before we even considered buying the PF Coupe, I had met David's father, when he was at Cavallino, and we met and talked, and he introduced me. So I already knew, the senior Akababa.
He knew our relationship. Tom saw our relationship.
And it was great. And I think everybody sees like a great father-son relationship, and we all refer those to your own father-son relationship. So it's like, wow, that's a pretty neat thing.
It was so my dad was my first car guy, and we had always went to these shows together, especially as I came back from training and I got back home, and we started doing these car things together, and it's a tacky thing kind of to say. It's cheesy, but don't put it off.
Yeah,
the point of this.
Absolutely.
Do not put it off.
And
if I had thought, geez, what if I can, maybe do the car so we can rally it next year, the year after. I just spent all this money on this car. Don't put it off.
Right.
Do it if you love it.
Right.
Because it all doesn't.
Well, David
matter.
said something to me.
Matter,
I saw David
picture.
in person in Florida, and it was one of these things where I saw him, and you really don't know what to say. And David said the best thing to break it to me, and he said, "Look," he goes, "I just have to tell you something, that if you hadn't helped me find this in the time that I wanted to do it, and then fix the car, and then deliver it, and then give it to me with my dad, we wouldn't even had one." So and like when I heard that, it made me feel so much better to be able to say, well, it's true. It's like you sometimes don't get what you want out of life, but you do savor the things that you do get. And the fact that David got that one time with his dad, that he will live with him forever, and the fact that I was honored to be part of that, and to have played a role in that, and to make a big difference, and to know that his father, at the end of his life, he had done the thing that he always wanted to do with his son. As parents, as me as a parent, I see those things, and it just really was a bittersweet, but yet the sweetness was there.
And it's one of those things that I came to terms with mourning my dad's loss is, you have to be thankful for what you've got, not disdainful of what you don't get to do or don't have. And I'm very thankful to Tom, and I'm thankful for Ed for having the car, and I'm thankful for my dad for doing the rally, even though I bet he didn't feel as good as he would have 5 years before. Never let on, But I'm thankful for all of that and getting to do what we can do.
And this car lives on. I mean, that's the
great
thing.
And that's the next thing. The car. My memories with the car live on. The car lives on. The car is going on to another chapter now. People really appreciate this car. They think it's a very special car. So it's gone back to Tom after Cavallino in January. I think in the summer I sent it back to you, because there were things that we hadn't done. The headliner was really becoming an issue with all the driving, and I don't think it had been driven nearly as much. It was really sagging onto my head while I was driving it after the rally.
And the Aichababs are both tall guys, so they're standing there with the curtains hanging down their head.
And then it began to pop the dome light out. It was sagging so much. I had to put the dome light in the glove box so to pull the dome light out of the socket.
So we were able to do this. I mean, and the other thing that was, fantastic, we were able to save the headliner. We're not going to just, restore this car. So our process is trying to save as much of the original equipment and original details of this car as we can. And there will come a day in which we won't be able to save certain things, but we're trying our best, and that's the next step. The next step is to get it and take it to a national show and continue taking this car out and showing the world what an original car is. And
it's a special car on so many levels. Even as just a material object, I could bring it to any Ferrari gathering. I think people would appreciate its originality, And then you dive into its history and its story, and even its fairly brief history with me and Tom over the past 3.5 years or so. And It's a very multi-faceted story, and that's why you look at these cars and you think of them really as objects of art, because art is supposed to make you feel things.
Right.
And if you look at these old cars, especially the ones that aren't all dolled up and stripped of their history,
It's
you know,
the
you look
mark.
at these old cars, they make you feel things if you learn about them.
Yeah, because every little nick and every little story, there's a story behind every single little mark that's on this car. And the thing about it, I also have been saying that a lot of times, you know, like a history of a car, when you buy a car, it's like, you know, purchased in New York, you know, then second owner moved it to Chicago, but you know what? Those are just line items.
Right.
But what we just shared with you could just simply be a line item, you know, purchased in, you know, Oregon, shipped to Florida, you know, owner in Florida, okay?
Yeah.
But you know what?
But there's so much more to that, and this is a way to express that.
And that's what I love, and that's what I want to do more of.
Story
of it. We just fleshed out a line item.
Right, exactly.
So, you know, I hope you enjoyed it, and, you know, we'll hope to bring you more.
Very good.
Thanks for doing this thing with me, David.
Thank you. Nicely done, Tom.
Great.
Very
thanks.
good.
Unfortunately, Ed Long passed away in 2016, but he sent me this note shortly after in Monterey.